Who's there, ref? That's he got the ball. Good evening, Tottenham fans all across the world, and welcome back to the Irish Hotspur with your boys Dave, Jack, and Sam. No Johnny today. Johnny's gone MIA. I don't know where he is, so I do hope that's not an emergency and everything is okay. So we have brought Dermo in, and tonight what we're going to talk about is what's gone on in the medical department this season. A lot of players have seemed to have gone and got help to get back fit externally outside of the club, which is not a common trend you see at a lot of football clubs. So we're going to talk about a lot about the medical department and the injuries this season. Who's responsible for it? Is it down to Ange's taxing style of players? Is it down to the disarray within the medical department? We're also going to talk about the season ticket prices. They are up. Daniel Levy basically has a decision to make Friday, so I bet he is preying on us overturning AZ Alkmaar in the Europa League on Thursday night, because if he comes out and announces a ticket hike and we get knocked out, it's not going to go down too well. And then we're also going to talk a little bit ahead of Thursday night. You know, what does this game hold for Tottenham in terms of season defining for a season? We know that, but also Postecoglou's future. I think the question needs to be asked: if it doesn't go our way, what do we do in terms of the dugout between now and the end of the season? So plenty of great things to talk about. We are just going to get straight into it. I know a lot of people are complaining about our long intros into videos lately, so we're going to mix that up a little bit, and we're going to get straight into it. We'll bring your comments up as we go along. As always, feel free to get your comments in the chat, get your questions in the chat, and we will try and get as many of them as possible. But Jack, over to you. Let's go, my man.
And also as well, everybody, for all the members, you know, one of the perks and benefits is that at the end of the show, we will reserve a bit of time to answer some of your questions. So in the community section, feel free to respond to that. But the first part we're going to be discussing is in the title. As you can tell, Tottenham's medical department is in disarray. And, you know, we're going to be discussing maybe if there are deeper issues than just Ange Postecoglou's play style causing these injuries. Spurs have had some serious injury troubles this season, lads, but could the injury troubles maybe be attributed to deeper issues inside the medical department? For example, Richarlison is the latest player to seek medical treatment outside the club. He's flown to Brazil to work with a doctor he has worked with before in an effort to regain full fitness. Romero just recently, you know, outsourced his medical work and credited, even on social media, the Argentina physio team for helping him regain his fitness. He, in fact, wrote, "Grateful to the physios at Argentina for pulling me out of a bad moment and getting me back onto the field where I am so happy." Mickey van de Ven is another example. He went on to see a few people externally outside the club to help with his hamstring injury and also to help his body adapt back to the style of play. And then also, just after 20 years at the club, the head of medicine and sports science, Geoff Scott, left in the club in August, and Spurs have technically not hired anyone in that role since. They have conducted 2 reviews of the medical department in less than a year because of the amount of injuries we've had. Spurs have been advertising for a new head of medicine and sports science and are looking for a rehab physio, a performance rehab coach, and an emerging talent development physio. Many of the injuries, Sam, you know, have been, you know, hamstring related, and many of the fans have attributed it, you know, to Ange's demanding play style on the pitch. But do you think maybe the injuries could be attributed to something else, perhaps actually the incompetency of the medical department?
I think it's definitely a case of there's some incompetency there. Kind of for as long as I can remember, we've had injury issues. Obviously, it seems to be exacerbated now, and I would say that is down to Ange's training style / like the intensity of everything that we do. I think that, you know, there clearly was an issue at the beginning of the season where they sacked or they let someone go of 20 odd years, as you said, and basically did a whole overhaul of the medical department, which in my opinion was long overdue. I mean, it seems to me, and maybe it's something that's been in the past as well, like you say that the majority of our injuries are sort of hamstring or ACL injuries, but it seems like the majority of our injuries are re-injuries. You know, players come back and they get injured again. And that, for me, isn't necessarily on Ange. I mean, you can question whether he's right to play, you know, Mickey van de Ven and Romero straight away in that Chelsea game. But I'll be honest, I think that all of us got a boost when we saw that. You know, it's easy to sit there and be sort of armchair medical departments and say, oh, you know, we lost both the players after that game, and you know, it's ridiculous.
How do we know they weren't cleared by the medical team, though, Sam? You know what I mean?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. It's not. I don't think that is necessarily on Ange. I mean, personally, in that Chelsea game, I would have only played one of them because at the time I thought Dragusin was actually playing quite well. And wasn't necessarily deserving to be dropped. Obviously, his form dropped off a cliff not long after that. But yeah, I mean, for me, there clearly is something wrong with the training. But how many times have we seen players come back? You know, you only have to look a few seasons back to think of the likes of Lo Celso, you know, Lamela, Richarlison, all these players. They come back for 2-3 games and then they get a slight knock. You know, it looks like a dead leg, and suddenly they're out for months with some sort of ankle injury or your calf strain, something else. I mean, even Maddison, when he went off against Chelsea, right? You know, he looked fine. He seemed disappointed to be subbed off. I'm talking about Chelsea last season. And then all of a sudden he's out for like 4 months. So, you know, we see, you know, someone saying about the cryo chamber, Jack saying it. we have the state of the art, you know, training facilities, but, you know, you can kind of liken the quote that Pochettino said about having a great home but having IKEA furniture. I mean, it seems the same can be said about the medical department for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's also the fact that, right, you know, they've conducted 2 reviews, you know, of the medical department in less than a year. They haven't even made any of the new hirings yet. And also, you know, like maybe brought up by Sam earlier, you know, Dave, technically we have had injury problems for a long time, you know, even before the time of Postecoglou. Yes, this year it's like more ridiculous than ever. But you do have to maybe take into consideration that this has been a problem for a while now at Spurs. And maybe it's just the fact that now all of a sudden, you know, that the problem's gotten this bad that maybe Spurs are finally taking a look at the medical department as a whole. So where do you lie on it, Dave? You know, Sam sort of seemed to, you know, give a bit of answer for both. Yes, part of it's Ange, but, you know, there is some incompetency there. Would you attribute it to one more than another?
Look, first of all, you know, I think I've made it pretty clear where I stand, you know, in recent weeks. I think, you know, it's coming to an end for Ange Postecoglou, but what I don't think we should get into the realm of doing is just because we hate the guy, or a lot of people hate the guy, that you start pinning everything down to him. And I think that's been the case with Tottenham's injury crisis. And the reason why I say that, Jack, is, look, players going and receiving external treatment is nothing new in football. I mean, I've heard of players all my lifetime at lots of different clubs seeking specialist treatment elsewhere. But that's usually with an injury that is beyond the medical team's expertise. A lot of the injuries we suffered this season are nowhere near that. You're talking about players that maybe are out for a year or longer with an injury they've had, that they've gone to seek specialist treatment. But what I've never seen is multiple players in one season seeking treatment outside the club, which for me shows that there is a distrust of the medical department internally from within the playing squad, that they clearly feel that they're not helping them with the levels, with them recovering from their injuries and stuff like that, which then leaves open the question of incompetency, right? And then you go on to the incompetency question. Well, then there's been 2 internal reviews in 1 year because the amount of injuries that we have been picking up. That's why they've had the 2 internal reviews. And I also think, look, despite Geoff Scott being around 20 years, putting out advertisements to sort of fill them vacancies stinks of a medical department in disarray, Jack. And I think a recognition that it does need drastically improving, especially in the area that Geoff Scott was. He was head of medicine and sports science at Tottenham, which means he's the one that puts all the practices in play and stuff like that. Now, I do agree with Sam that, look, this injury crisis isn't just under Postecoglou. Invite everybody. Go back to the games underneath Antonio Conte. You can bring them up on Google. They'll give you the starting line and the benches. Go and look in his second season how many times he had to fill out that bench with academy kids. You know, there was a period of time, and he was moaning about it in press conferences and stuff like that. So these injuries, you know, and the extent to them do go beyond Postecoglou. So that's why I struggle to pin it down on Postecoglou and the way he's asking players to play. Don't get me wrong. I think that could be the case with 1 or 2 players who may struggle with the demands of what Postecoglou is asking them to do. But let's not forget, we had Antonio Conte with the Marine, who famously was killing them in preseason and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, there was a big debate about how much Conte was making them run in the pre-game warm-ups. You know, was it too much heading into a game? Is that leaving the players too tired? So I don't really want to hear it in terms of about regimes and what they're asking them to do, because the reality is, I think Conte's regime was a lot more demanding. And if you go back to Pochettino's, name one player that had an ounce of fat on them. They were all like that. Even Harry Kane was absolutely lean.
Yeah.
And they famously had to meet running stats during the week to even be considered in terms of team selection. So his regime was demanding as well. So I don't put it down to the regime. I'll put it down to the changeover in the medical department. Now, when it comes to Geoff Scott, Jack, I know the Athletic reported a while ago that Postecoglou and Geoff Scott had a falling out over the workload of the players and the injury recovery, that they weren't seeing eye to eye on that. But the club have since come out and stated that, look, we were going to change that based off the reviews, regardless if he's falling out with someone like Geoff Scott, which I find very, very interesting. So for me, the fact I do think a lot of the injuries is down to the medical department. They're looking to sort of change it over, or that's what the plan has been. And within that, I don't think they've got the right personnel, or I do think the players have suffered. The fact that they're also putting out advertisement, Jack, first of all, a club of Tottenham Hotspur size, stature, and if we have the ambition to go and win trophies, you don't put advertisements out like that. Legally, you may have to do it, but you still go and headhunt the very best in the business and try and get them in here. And I don't think we do that. And I think it's a crying shame, because you look at the new you look at the new training center we built, we've got state-of-the-art facilities. So what's the point of having that if you're not going to match it up with the best personnel? And I think you can actually attribute, in my opinion, a lot of the injuries down to the medical department being in disarray, in my opinion.
This is from Super Spurs here, Dermo, and just to the rest of you guys. I'm no medical expert, but there has been repeated years of injury struggles. This is my only bit of sympathy I have for Ange. He can't be responsible for proper recovery and treatment off the field. This kind of reminds me of when even Antonio Conte, to some degree, I think at one time he did it with the transfers, and then another time he did it with the medical department, where he's like, listen, I can't just be the spokesperson for all these. I'm not even a medical expert myself here. I don't know exactly what they're doing to get these guys back into shape. Why don't you ask them? And so, Dermo, is this kind of something that you felt maybe for a while now, even before Ange Postecoglou, that there actually has been incompetency inside the medical treatment room even before Ange came here? And is that maybe some sympathy you have for him?
I do have sympathy for Ange. I think there is incompetence within Tottenham.
I think, Dermo, your
mic is, you sound like you're having problems with the mic again. While you're fixing that,
Dave, do you kind of get my question on that? It's like, oh yeah, much better, Dermo. So what do you make of a Super Spurs comment here that this is the little bit of sympathy that he has for Ange? And do you think maybe a lot of people would have sympathy for Ange, even if they're Ange out, that the medical department hasn't been a help to him?
Yeah, I do have a bit of sympathy for the injuries, but I think you have to look at the medical thing as a bigger picture. That's come under Levy and the board and his restructuring of the club. You can't blame the manager, but for the injuries, you can't blame the manager for players coming back and then getting injured again. He gets the okay from the medical team, say, right, that player's ready to play, and the manager wants to pick him. And Sam's right. For the Chelsea game, what boost we got when we saw Romero and Van der Ven back in that pitch. I just think Ange has been unlucky this year. I mean, I could go back to 96, 97. We had a horrendous year with injuries. That year as well. I know Dave and Jack have said back in World War II again, but teams do go through seasons of having loads of injuries and having consistent injuries, but the demands as the game has got bigger. There's more demands on players these days. They're playing more matches. There's more international games. There's more games in the season, especially if you're playing in 4 competitions. So you are going to pick up more injuries. Where the problem I have is Daniel Levy. He builds this world-class stadium. He builds this world-class training facility. He doesn't build a world-class medical unit. And I think that is the problem. We haven't put the infrastructure, all the money into infrastructure, into the medical side of it. And we're falling behind.
Do you think it really costs very much money to have, a high-level medical department? Is this just something Daniel Levy's been ignoring because he might not be able to understand how to be able to, sort of demand the most from all departments?
Doesn't matter how much money it costs, because at the end of the day, if you're funneling 40, 50 million per signing, you're also putting so much into their wages, signing on fee, then in order to protect that investment and get the maximum out of it, you've got to have a really good medical department. No point in paying them fees and bringing in all these players for all that money if you're not going to have the best in class to keep them on the pitch, Jack.
I just wonder if this is a case of Daniel Levy either cutting corners, or is it just a case of Daniel Levy's own incompetency that, he hasn't even thought about, the fact that the medical department has been underperforming for some years. It could be similar to what we saw with the recruitment, right, under Steve Hitchen, where he just sort of let Steve Hitchen just waste hundreds of millions, right in front of him until he finally, awoke to it and brought in someone like Paratici. So Sam and Dermo, do you kind of get where I'm going with that? Is this just also maybe Daniel Levy perhaps just ignoring or maybe not even realizing that there's something deeper going on here, and he's just not even realized it maybe up until this point?
Yeah, let Sam go first because you had his hand up before, so I'll let you go first, Sam. Go
on. Can you hear me, by the way? Because
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we all kind of have, like, all of us kind of understand that Levy doesn't seem to care about anything football related. I think that we all just kind of have to accept that,
Yeah.
Well, accept it in a loose term, because obviously we're, people are standing up to them, and there's Levy out chants every week, and there's another protest that's scheduled. But I just, he doesn't care about the stuff that's not being seen, in my opinion. And if he is to, until this stuff gets brought to light, like it has been in the last 2 seasons, because of how ridiculous the injuries have gotten, I think that's the only way that you'll see him actually, start to stand up and care. I mean, it's crazy to see the amount of injuries that we get. And yes, we've said, maybe it is partly on Ange, but the misallocation of funds to staff members. We're seeing similar things happen at United. I read today that they had a body language expert on 175k. I mean, what? So, it's not just us, but if we're gonna, run with the big dogs, as they say, then he needs to actually take a look internally and strive forward in terms of getting someone, so that the players don't feel like, as we say, they need to go and seek help outside the club. Because it's 3 or 4 players this season that have gone to external medical departments. I mean, that must be embarrassing. Players must be terrified to get injured at Spurs, because it's like, obviously getting injured is no one's favorite thing, but like, you'd be thinking, God, I've got to go and now deal with the worst medical department in the country, basically, and hope that they can get me correct. And I know people don't like him, but you look at the likes of Harry Winks, right? And all that stuff was coming out about him, saying that he was playing all of his games with like quite serious ankle pain, but that's just how it had gotten to. And you wonder, is that something to do with how bad the medical department is, that they allowed it to get that bad?
Well, not only Winks, Harry Kane famously ended up going with a Canadian doctor, didn't he? Flying him over and flying out to him just to keep himself on the pitch and managing his ankle injury. There's been a history of this. But look, Michael George says, "Oh, you're making excuses for the worst manager we've ever had." I mean, Jack's listed out a history of players, that have sought medical advice outside. I've also brought up the fact that Conte also had a lot of academy kids on the bench at one point due to a massive injury crisis, and the fact we've had 2 medical department reviews within a year stinks of a medical department that is in crisis and not fit for purpose. I don't think anyone's making an excuse for Ange Postecoglou. But on the Van de Ven one, I also think was very interesting. I read up today, some expert that he went to see. He was saying, that Van de Ven has to change his running style, because of his hamstring injuries, and so in order to not reoccur them and stuff like that, they need to get his body basically in a way where these don't reoccur again, and he has to change the way he's running and stuff like that. Johnny speaks about Romero coming in here already with a history of problems. We also signed Richarlison from Everton with a history of problems. Dom Solanke comes in from Bournemouth with no injuries, all of a sudden comes into Tottenham and he's been MIA with injuries this season. And for me, like I'm saying, I don't think you can all put it down to Ange Postecoglou. I think if you are, you just really hate the guy, but I don't think you're doing any justice for the next manager coming in the door, because the reality is, if he suffers the same crisis, what are you going to pivot to then? I think, in fairness, if we really want to try and help fix this club going forward, we have to try and pinpoint what is a club issue. And I do think when you look at the medical department, I think a lot of players have suffered in the changeover that Spurs are trying to make in that department, but not fully having it ready to go for this season to hit the ground running, which then I think the players have suffered because of, and that's why you're seeing them all go outside. So for me, I do think that is an area that really needs to be looked at. You know, you're pumping millions into these athletes, you're giving them best planes to fly around in, best hotels to stay in. Why wouldn't you give them the best medical care possible?
And I think to King Hoddle's point as well, we've had injury issues for a while now, and a lot of the managers that we've had even recently do demand plenty from their players, either through preseason, through training, or even just, from their own play style on the pitch. He says Conte worked them just as hard. Poch's players famously even said that they needed 2 lungs in order to play. I will concede, though, that neither of them demanded as much in-game sprinting, though, and running as Ange. You have heard that before, Dave, though, right? That some ex-pros and ex-players have said that there's nothing harder in football than to all of a sudden, be tracking back towards your own goal, to be running backwards, and to have to do that can put real strain on the body. Could you maybe say that Ange's play style to a degree does maybe ask a bit more of the players and tends to maybe, cause more injuries? Or is it again just the case that maybe this season has just been that the medical department has just been at its very worst?
Well, the thing is, I don't think the thing is, I think we make too many excuses in terms of asking our players to work hard, though, lads, because for me, I listen to anyone from the class of 92. They often say their training was a lot more intense than half the match days on the weekend. You go back to Pochettino's regime. That wasn't an easy one in terms of fitness. That was notoriously tough. Even players coming back from injury had to meet certain metrics before they were even considered for team selection. No one complained about it then when you're winning games. Conte's was notoriously tough. We've seen players physically getting sick in preseason training and stuff like that. So for me, it's not really down to, the intensity of the regime. I think if you want to go and win trophies, you have to have a really strong sort of intense training. If you think Liverpool players aren't training intensely or didn't under Jurgen Klopp, or Man City players aren't doing it under Guardiola, you're sadly mistaken. They are. They're all training at a certain intense level, which therefore makes the games easier on the weekend. So for me, I think we make too many excuses in that regard at the end of the day. What I would question is how many players are actually, committed to being a footballer at Tottenham Hotspur. And the reason why I say that, you hear the likes of Porro speaking about doing extra recovery outside of Tottenham Hotspur, extra training. Son has done it to a large degree at times. You also hear of Kulusevski, the same thing. Never hear that coming from like James Maddison, Johnson, players that are in and out of the team. Basuma went skiing when he had time off rather than, knuckle down and get himself ready for Europa League campaign and try and save his Tottenham career. So, again, I don't think you can put it all down to a manager. At the end of the day, if you want to be successful, you've got to do the right things. You've got to live your life right. You've got to dedicate everything to football. And I don't think we've got enough players within the squad that are willing to do that, which I also think, doesn't help with the likes of your injuries and stuff like that. So I think you can also put it down to some of these players not doing extra work and stuff like that, like Porro. Like you look at Cristiano Ronaldo, look how much money he invested into recovery and everything else outside to be the best. Look what he's gone on to do. So for me, I think it's just too simplistic to blame it on Ange Postecoglou, in my opinion.
What do you think, during the Romero and Van de Ven absences, right? And there was all this stuff coming out from Ange, and he was saying, slow healer and stuff like that. Do you think and the previous commenter who was saying that, we're just giving excuses to the worst manager ever. And, it's crazy for people to think that about me, because I've had criticism from the comments saying I'm too negative.
I think Michael just hates Ange Postecoglou that much. He blames apps. If there was a shit left in the toilet, he'd blame Ange Postecoglou,
and he'll blame you, Sam, too.
Fair enough. But do you not think that there's something to be said about the kind of excuses that Ange was having to throw out is because he genuinely, like I said about the players having no confidence in the medical staff, he had no confidence, so he was basically having to make up on the fly why these players were still out and what was going on, because our medical staff seemed to have no clue, all the gear and no idea, as they say.
Well, how can he answer a question about Romero when his recovery is in the hands of the Argentinian physio department? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, if you look at Europe as well, they do have a medical person comes out and does his own press conference about injuries. It happens a lot in Europe. Premier League's the only place where it doesn't happen. So I think the need to start coming out with, this is why even a monthly medical review of the players out, give us all an update. on what's happening. I don't think you can blame everything on Ange. I think, Ange has been poor. The results haven't been good. We can all agree on that. But I don't think you can blame everything this on Ange. I just think it also is the demand of football these days. There's a lot more games. There's a lot more matches. The seasons are longer. The rest periods between matches are shorter. And players don't have time to recover properly. And that's got to be, and also VAR as well, stop and starting during the game. How many injuries have players got injured during the VAR break when they've stopped for 5, 6, 7 minutes and have to start again? You know, everything has to be put into the melting pot. And also, I'll finish off with this. Our medical team is probably the worst in the Premier League. And then you have to blame Levy for that. You have to blame the people at the club for not putting the right infrastructure in. We got the best that you look at Man United and Jim Ratcliffe, his interview yesterday, and the amount of cuts he's had to make. We're not in that financial problem. We could go out and buy ourselves a new medical team and put the best medical unit and team in Europe together. But he just won't spend the money. And it's us, the players and the manager, that's getting the tail end of that. And that is why we're not up there with the top, because he won't put the money in to make us the best. You look at Man United, they could have been gone bust by Christmas, but by Jesus, they did spend money on the best of this, the best of that, the best of everything. That's why they're successful. If you don't put the money in, you can get the rewards. But you can blame Ange for a lot, but I think some of these injuries, I think you've got to give him a break somewhere along the line.
And just quickly before we move on, look, I know some people are maybe coming in late and then they're going, oh, what can you... Look, we're not talking... We understand results ain't going well, and we've also said, this is coming to an end between now and the end of the season. It's just a matter of when. We understand that. But what we are talking about is the injuries and the amount that's gone on with the medical department, the amount of players that are seeking external, help with their injuries. We're saying, you can't just put that all down on Ange. You have to look within the club. And if we want that improved, that medical department severely needs to be improved. We're not using it as a defensive Postecoglou at all. We're just saying, the medical department is a huge issue at Tottenham Hotspur and something that needs to be brought to the fore for people to understand. Look, Jack, let's move on.
Yeah. Donovan Osterreicher saying, I'm at just over 15% body fat right now, making me feel fat, lad. But I was actually just looking that up. How does one even do that? Donovan, it seems like...
Just look at me and you'll feel happy with yourself.
I wonder how you've been doing that, Donovan. You have to see some high-level doctors in order to do that. I'm actually curious what my own is at this stage, but I'm now looking it up, and that what the AI algorithm has given me is some pretty intense sort of kind of measurements and whatnot. I'm not too sure if I'm prepared for that. But thanks for 28 months, by the way, Donovan. You've been with us for a while now. Thanks for making the videos possible, whether it's been the fan shows, pre-match build-ups, plenty of good stuff. And hopefully you and I can beat up next week, over the international break. Big up to you, Donovision. And Jerome as well, Dave, saying people are just giving poor recruitment a pass and letting everyone, letting everything on them and putting everything on the manager. We keep doing this every single season. Once again, if not for prime Harry Kane and Son, we would be where we are right now. Dave, singing from your Bible, singing from your hymn sheet.
No, look, and this is something that I'm trying to convey, especially through this injury crisis and that the injuries that we've suffered. We can keep pinning everything on the manager, because I can guarantee you a lot of what you're hearing about Ange now, you can go back and look in many chats, many people's tweets or social medias around the time Conte was under pressure, and Jose Mourinho and Nuno, and a lot of the same sort of questions were being asked at them. The reality is, when you go back and look at a lot of recruitment under these managers, it's all been underwhelming. Even the recruitment under Ange, you control facts, you control figures at me, but at the end of the day, what are you spending it on to improve your team? You look at Bournemouth right now, their recruitment have been players with European experience to come in and affect their team. Our recruitment hasn't been like that. We've signed, young players from all over the world, to try and bring them in here and try and form some sort of team. So I do, to Jerome's point, recruitment is another area that I've tried to highlight that we do need to look at and really improve. Many people that were sitting there going, our summer window has been underwhelming, will be the same people sitting there now going, another manager has to get better out of this squad. I severely think when you look at a lot of our issues over the last 2 seasons, I think a lot of Spurs fans are probably overestimating how good this squad is, or overhyping it to a certain degree. When it's filled out with a lot of young players with young potential, you're going to see a lot of inconsistencies. You're going to see players keep making the same mistakes and stuff like that. And when you don't have really good senior pros in and around to drag them forward, you're also going to see a lot of what we've seen this season. So I do agree with Jerome that the recruitment also has to be called into question.
Or even just as well, Jerome, we've been here before, right? We're under, the likes of Conte, Jose Mourinho. They had a world-class attack in the case of Harry Kane and Son, both being in their prime. But then look at the defense that was just never improved, never
The
changed,
thing
never
is,
even in any way sort of brought in any sort of competition back there. We just had to continue to roll out the same players of Davis, Eric Dyer, Davinson Sanchez, and then finally, after years and years of asking for some sort of competition, all they bring in was what, Clement Longley or something like that. At that point, it's always been the case that we've been left short in one area or another. Or even when we do fix a problem, all of a sudden, then another problem in the squad arises that just doesn't get addressed.
And the thing is, my whole aim by doing this is so that when the next manager comes in, we can actually kick on. Regardless whether you like Ange or not, everyone can sort of agree. Every manager since Ange has sort of had 2 years and they're sort of turfed out of the club. Things really go wrong in the second season. And there has to be questions asked of that. Why do we keep going, failing in the second season? If we really want to move, and like many people want Iraola in, if we bring him in, we need to change what we're doing internally so we can see the benefits of what he's doing at Bournemouth. Because if we don't, he'll suffer the same problem. We'll be here again in another 18 months, 2 years' time. So my whole aim by highlighting these issues is so that we can start putting pressure on the club to try and change these so that we can really help the managers and really kick on. Big up, Jerome. Really appreciate the support, my man, and hopefully you're keeping well, buddy.
And then Super Spurs TV. Thank you, Super Spurs. Thank you, Jerome and Donovan, for the
Big up,
support,
man.
by the way. 22-23 season, we had Romero, Davis, Longley all absent at the same time, and extensive absences as well for Bentancur, Basuma, and Skip concurrently. This ain't a new problem. Still, Ange, for me, pushes too hard in a game. This is what I think we were just trying to... I think Super Spurs has done this here. It's not like we're trying to make a huge excuse, for Ange or anything like that. I think we're just trying to, sort of point out that maybe this has been a problem that has sort of just been at Spurs for a long time now that's just been kind of ignored. I kind of likened it, Super Spurs, to during the times that, Daniel Levy took so long, to get rid of the recruitment team that Steve Hitchen had built around him. It was just money being wasted and wasted and wasted after years. And it was just baffling to me that Daniel Levy just sort of let that continue. And it seems like something's happening here with the medical department as well, where previous managers have complained. We've seen issues for a long time now when it comes to just trajectories and timetables for when the players are coming back. All of a sudden, they get injured again. Managers have no idea when they're supposed to be coming back or whether they can rely on them to, hit the ground running after coming back from injury. It seems like all these issues have been the case for a while now and actually just been ignored, kind of like what we did with Steve Hitchen and Daniel Levy. So it's not maybe that crazy to think, that maybe this is just one of the many issues at Spurs that have persisted for a long time and has just been weirdly ignored.
But what I would say is you still had, some of the old pros around from the Pochettino era, old experienced players like your Kanes, your Llorises and stuff like that. We don't have them players to rely on now. So again, when you don't have them sort of players to rely on now, again, it's another huge problem to a degree. You don't have players to try that love the club of being at the heights that are trying to rally people through this. That's all gone within the dressing room now. You're left with a whole new team, a whole lot of new individuals. And I would argue Postecoglou's injury crisis, yes, he's got the worst results in probably ever at Tottenham. But I also think he's had the worst injury crisis all at once that I've ever seen at Tottenham in my life. So again, I do understand what you're saying, Blaine, but this is my whole point, can't keep having this under every single manager. At some point, we've got to try and keep players on the pitch so that our best players on the pitch as well, so that we can go and try and win things collectively. Having this amount of injuries can't keep happening. Under Conte, he was doing well until he suffered that injury crisis. The wheels fell off. Jose Mourinho was doing well somewhere into his second season. Injury crisis hit. Wheels fell off. You know what I mean? We can't keep going through this cycle, and that's what I'm keep trying to reiterate. We need to put pressure on the club to do better. We need to understand what's going in the club, inside the club a lot more, so that we can really, when the managers do come under these situations, we really have a good understanding of what is their fault and what isn't, because I almost feel like now we're just asking the manager to wave a magic wand and be the magic man, and no matter what comes his way, he's got to make it work. And to a certain degree, that's what you expect of your manager. But most other clubs help to try and alleviate them pitfalls, them stuff that come their way. At Tottenham, we just sit there and throw it at them, go and deal with it. Can't keep happening that way. We're not going to get success by doing that.
Just maybe final thing,
I-
go ahead, Sam.
Oh, sorry. Well, if you want to, because I've got a bit of a rant, I think. So
Work,
I
man.
was
you
just
want
going
to
to bring
say
up
your piece,
Artist T
Goodwood?
saying this message lacks context, guys. He was saying that was when the World Cup was taking place. Do you think we're missing context, in previous managers, injuries, or do you think there is a connection between all of them? Do you think there is a commonality or
But
similarity?
it wasn't just the World Cup. Like, there was large periods, towards even the back end of that campaign. Go and look on Google with the squads and the sub bench where Conte had to have a lot of youngsters off the bench, a lot of academy kids and stuff like that. It's not just under Ange. You're right. The World Cup was in that season, but we had massive injury crisis either side of that as well.
And then actually, thank
So-
you, Paul. Oh yeah, Sam, go ahead, please.
I just because it's about this super chat as well. For me, and I'll relate it to the last game. It's the last bit of this super chat that I'm not sure I necessarily agree with, but then I also don't disagree with it. I look at us play at the moment, right? And maybe it's because of the injuries, who knows? But I don't see any patterns of play. No patterns of play. Nothing from the, high octane football that we saw when Ange first came in. And I've had my criticisms of those first 10 games myself. I won't go into that. I look at it and I don't know if it's because of the players, the press isn't being led by Solanke or hasn't been led by Solanke for the past couple months. So the press for me has basically completely gone. For me, where I criticize Ange in this whole injury debacle for how he plays is what Eugene said in the comments about his defensive system. I can't tell you how many times a game since Ange has come in, my dad, my brother, my granddad, anyone in my group chats have said, what a ball that is over the top. The Pogba style Hollywood ball that teams play against us every single game, right? They get the ball just before the halfway line. They ping a 70-yard pass over the fullback. And basically the brief is for any player who can pick a pass out. If you can get it within 10 yards of the byline and the corner flag, someone's going to get it, And then the case is that the fullbacks, the whole team, everyone has to basically haul ass to get all the way back to try and stop the attack, And in the Bournemouth game, the amount of times they ping the ball to Semenyo or to Kirkes or Cliver, any of these players, and they were just picking it up in space. They had so much time to bring the ball down, and all of a sudden you're scrambling. So for me, that's where the criticism comes for Ange, because he's not setting us up to be resilient enough. And it's not me asking him to be pragmatic, because I don't think that having some sort of defensive shape is being pragmatic. I mean, look at how he was set up with Bournemouth pressing us, right? And I think it also comes to do with the brief of passing out the back. And that's not, strictly with Ange. That's a lot of managers in football now. But Bournemouth were pressing us with 4 or 5 players every time. 19 seconds into the game, we can see the chance from a dreadful pass because there's no real options to play a decent pass forward. I made a joke to my
I'm
dad
sorry,
before
you
the
can't
game
blame
started.
Ange for Romero's shit pass. I'm sorry, Sam.
No,
Again,
I'm not.
Look,
I'm not blaming.
that's
blaming
player
Ange
decisions. No,
necessarily
look,
for that.
I get your point in general, right? About no patterns of play and stuff, and you can see that going forward. I certainly agree with you on that. But some of the decision makings from Pedro Porro at right back, putting it across his own goal in towards the centre and shit like that. I'm sorry, for me, that split second decision making from the player, which is piss poor. Some of the stuff we're seeing that they're being asked to do, some of the decisions within that is absolutely shocking. And they also have, and this is why I question, people say this squad is better than what's performing, maybe to a certain degree, but how good is it above what we're performing? And that's my question. Some of the decision makings going on is absolutely shocking. Like, for instance, some of the decision making from Vicario I'm seeing, absolutely shocking.
I just want to add one thing that Sam. Sorry, Sam. Go ahead.
Go on, Devin. No, go on, Devin.
Your thing about Bournemouth, I think also we play with Ange. He plays so far up the field. Tottenham play so high line that also there's a lot more running back to do. Under a Conte or under Mourinho, there wasn't such a gap between the defense and the midfield. We were tightly compact.
Yeah, but then
where-
going forward, you had to do so much running. So it
Yeah,
doesn't
we
matter
had
whether
to-
you're doing it backwards and
no,
forwards, you're still doing the same
Yeah,
distance.
but the point I'm making with the injuries as well, especially with the hamstrings, the players have to do a hell of a lot more running back now because the press is so high up. So the likes of Romero, or especially Van de Ven, he's had 2 hamstring injuries under Ange Postecoglou. And how many times has he had to run back and be the last defender and get tackles in, or run the length of the pitch? If you look at other managers, there wasn't so much running back because we weren't playing so high up the pitch. Sorry, I wasn't explaining myself right, Dave. Sorry. So I think Ange has got to take a small bit of responsibility for how he sets it up, but also players have to take responsibility themselves, who they pass to, and how they go out and deliver the tactics that Ange is asking us to play. And I think that there could be a breakdown of communication between Ange and the players. But I agree with Sam. You look at Bournemouth, they were pinging us left, right, and centre. And because we're playing so far up the pitch, it's easy. Every team works this out within 5 minutes. If we can see it after 5 minutes at the start of a game, how come Ange can't see it? That's the point I don't get. He must be able to see this. Any world-class manager changes it straight away or within 5 minutes. Right, we're going to change it tactically. It's just, I get what Sam was getting. Sorry, Sam, I didn't mean to cut hold you, but I was just trying to make that sort of point.
No, I get what he's saying, but for instance, you know, if we play pro club, Sam, and Eddie's got options around him, and he gives away the ball, we're not blaming you, your system, and your tactics. You're blaming Eddie because he's split-second decision making.
Yeah, the basics.
And, you know, like with Romero, if you go back and watch the first goal, they sort of half casually pressed Stanzo. As soon as Romero got that ball, they sprinted towards them. They used him as the trigger because he was so rusty. Smart management by Iriola. But Ange can't legislate for Romero making that shit pass. At some point, you know, a player needs to make smart decisions in a game and go, do you know what? Nothing's on. Just go long. Push us up the field, get behind it, get pressure on it. You know, there are things that the players can do, you know, that they choose not to do. For instance, anytime Vicario did go long, how many times did he miss his man yesterday to a large degree and stuff? Like, you do have to hold these counter players for some things as well. Because I heard it all under Conte, I've heard it all under Jose. You know, Bayer's better than what people say he is. Where is he now? Do you know what I mean? And stuff. I'm fed up with it. Like, for me, you do have to call in the caliber of players that we're signing. At the end of the day, I get what people are saying about Ange Postecoglou, the tactics and stuff like that. You've also got to call in the question of some of these players and their decision makings in games. For instance, Basumi yesterday, for the second chance they had, he had no one around him within a 10-yard radius. Takes a heavy touch, plays himself into trouble. That's him just being a brain dead absolute donut. You know what I mean? You're playing on an absolute perfect surface. There's no reason why when you take that touch, that ball should be bobbling around everything like you're playing on a pitch in the back arse of the country in Ireland. It's an absolute joke. Some of these players do have to be held accountable.
No, look, I 100% agree with that, and I'm not, I'm not necessarily saying that these players are blameless because I've had heavy criticism of Romero a lot this season, even before the injury. You know, I was begging for him to come back. That's how bad it had gotten. But I just look at how we set up, and I'll relate it to Jed Spence. I think Jed Spence is a great barometer of this, right? The defensive system is very lopsided for me. He's understood a little bit, and I'll give him some credit here, that inverting both the fullbacks was doing us no service, and it was doing us a disservice, right? You know, we were getting overrun on both sides every game last season. He decided to invert destiny less. Obviously now it's Spence, and since Spence has come in, he's been our best player. Mainly because other players have kind of dropped off because of their fitness or whatever it is. But the 2 games he's played Spence at right back, Spence has not been good, in my opinion, until he's gone back out to the left. And all the criticisms that I've had for Pedro Porro, where I'm saying, why the fuck is this guy so high up the pitch, playing as a number 10, or, you know, playing wherever he wants, when you've got all this space in behind? And the same thing is happening with Jed. So maybe I've got to cut Porro a little bit of slack in the sense that it's something that they're being asked to do rather than what they are actually, what their ability dictates as a player. So for me, the reason I'm saying about the passing out the back stuff is because you don't have the players around you. And yes, the players are making mistakes. I'm not disputing that. But you're asking them to play at such a high level, and as you say, Dave, they can just kick it long, and at times they do, but players are being drilled now, and it's not necessarily an Ange Postecoglou thing, that you've got to play out the back constantly. I've seen people destroying whoever the manager was for Southampton this season, where they were just playing out the back constantly.
Russell Martin,
constantly, yeah, exactly, and constantly giving up chances. But the problem for us is when we give the ball away, there's only one or two defenders back. I'd say 70% of the time we have one or two defenders back. And that leads back to the injuries, where you've got the likes of Van der Ven, who have got to basically pull their hamstrings to get back. And it's frustrating for me that I feel that this simple, what seems simple, and as Dermot said, if we can all see it, why is it not being fixed? This simple tweak of not committing everyone forward, especially because at the moment we don't have the ability to even find these players.
I hear you in terms of the defensive structure, right? And I do agree with you, actually, the way that he sorted out the left back problem, but the right back problem hasn't, because of what he's being asked to do. But also, you got to take into account Pedro Porro's given away the ball more than anybody in the top 10 leagues this season. You look at the first goal the other day. It was him that gave away the ball that led to us being countered on. They exploited that space in behind him, and went and scored for him. So this is why I keep saying I do get what you're saying. But also, some of these players also have to take large responsibility. Giving away the ball that amount of times, it doesn't matter who you are and what defensive structure you put in trying to play out from the back. If you're giving away the ball that many times and you're picking your passes wrong, you're going to get turned on as easy as we do at times. So I do get what you're saying in terms of, the right back situation needs to change. Could he maybe change up that midfield situation a little bit to give us a bit more defensive solidity? Fully agree with you. But when it does come out from passing out from the back, let's not forget, this is what many Spurs fans were calling for when they had enough at the end of Antonio Conte's era. They wanted to move into an era where we start playing out from the back, trying to play this attacking football. And, to a degree, maybe they didn't ask for Ange ball. But at the end of the day, even the next manager that comes in, I still think many people would still prefer to play out from the back and try and play this nice attacking football. But in order to do that, you do have to make smart decisions. And that's where I do think sometimes the players let themselves down to a certain degree. And I do hold them accountable sometimes. Like Pedro Porro at right back, kicking the ball back across your own goal. I mean, it's something you're taught when you're 4 years of age. You don't do. We've all been down soccer training. Sometimes if you heard your coaches, if you're a defender, don't put that ball across your own box, because you always give someone the opportunity that switched on to take that and put it home. Porro done it 4 or 5 times the other day. I mean, sorry, I can't excuse that. He has to take responsibility for that. But I do agree with what you're saying in terms of defensive structure. That's for sure.
I'm just going to pass off Paul Markey's comment to you here, Dave, and then we'll get on to our next question here. By the way, over 200 in the house on YouTube and well over 140 something on Twitter as well. So if you are watching us on Twitter, feel free to follow us over to YouTube, but please smash the like button if you are watching us over here, please. Paul Markey, Dave, saying fact, this has been a fact for the past 10 years or so. We've had a medical department full of quacks.
I mean, look, my whole lifetime, I remember Tottenham players being injured. You had Jamie Redknapp, Darren Anderton, all these players all my lifetime. We've also, always had injury crises, and I've always had my doubts about the medical department. I've always had my doubts to a degree about Geoff Scott to a certain degree. I've always said that to you, Jack. So for me, I sort of do understand where Paul Markey's coming from. I don't we can all live in the here and now, but when I actually think about my whole lifetime supporting Tottenham, we've always had this problem in terms of injuries. But I'd also argue, I think Tottenham also takes a gamble on a lot more injured players than maybe what other top 6 clubs do around the Premier League.
Yeah, Paul, I think he's just definitely confirming, more or less what a lot of people are saying is that even if I know Paul as well, I think is, not necessarily even Ange in or anything, but he is, showing sympathy here for the fact that this has been a problem that everyone has kind of been dealing with even before the age of Postecoglou. On to kind of the next question here, though. And Sam, I'm not, going to ask you to do too much heavy lifting on this one, but you do go to more games than Dave, Dermot, or I. By the way, this Friday, everyone, Spurs do have to announce whether they will be increasing season ticket prices for next season. Last season, they did raise the cost of the season ticket by 6% and did remove senior concessions. Do you think the club will hike the price of the season tickets 2 years in a row, Sam?
Look, I'm not given any reason to believe that they won't. I used to basically from 2010 to the season we signed Ange, and it was actually it wasn't necessarily because we signed Ange that we stopped going. But I basically went from that whole period, week in, week out, going to see, some amazing games and a lot of dross. But I was going with my dad, one of my brothers, and my granddad. And in the new stadium, we sit quite high up. And for a couple seasons, as my granddad was sort of getting older, we were thinking, he's all right going up, but when it's the end of the game and people are starting to rush, it's a bit wet because it's cold. Going downstairs for an 80-year-old man is not easy, especially when they're so steep. And for a couple seasons in a row, we tried to speak to the club to get them to basically help us move somewhere near but slightly lower. And they basically wanted either a 200% increase in the ticket price, or they wanted us to basically stick where we were. And so for a couple seasons, we sort of bit the bullet. We just accepted, this is it. They said, buy the tickets again. We'll try and help you to move somewhere else. It didn't happen. They just basically never responded to an email again. Then basically when we signed Ange, it got to the point of, you know what, fuck this, basically. We're in such turmoil at the moment. As I've said before, during that Conte season, I genuinely did not want to go. It takes an hour and a half to get there, and I'm complaining, but some people are traveling, multiple hours to get there. So I understand it. It's not just me, but so long to get there, you give up your whole day effectively to watch crap, and then the club basically fleece you for as much as they've got. And for me, it's like, it's typical Daniel Levy tactics, right? The season ticket renewal's coming up. The amount of times this has happened in the past where we haven't even had a manager, right? And they've been releasing the season ticket renewal. And it's like, well, who are we getting? And then there was rumors we were going to sign Conte. And so people bought their season tickets. Then we ended up signing Nuno. I know we got Conte in the end, but we signed Nuno. And everyone's like, well, what the fuck? I basically just committed to Conte ball, and now we've got effectively like a mid-table manager. Obviously respect to Nuno, he's doing well. That's not to say that he is a shit manager, but the club just don't seem to care. And every time people are like the supporters trust ask them to basically hold off on the renewal of the season tickets, they basically ignore the emails, they ignore the letters, they ignore the protests, and they just take and take and take. So for me, I think if they were gonna not raise the prices, we would have already seen them, or some sort of rumors that they were talking about not raising.
They'll be celebrating it, right?
I think they're waiting to see what happens in the Europa League, and if they have to, if we go out against Alkmaar or we go out in the next round, then they'll probably freeze the ticket prices. But if we go far, you can bet your bottom dollar that they're going to be raising those prices again.
100%. I like this comment here as well from G Giant 68. Friday and Shaq will be announced with ticket price rises in small print. And do you know what? That very well could happen. From my understanding, is they have to make a decision by Friday. But I think, look, Daniel Levy got a lot of backlash last year for putting them up. I think he raised the season ticket by 6% and got rid of the senior concessions, which was very unpopular around the Spurs fan base. And, listening to the Jim Radcliffe interview with Gary Neville on the overlap, they're hiking their prices next season. And when he was asked about it, he just put it down to inflation, and I think Daniel Levy, to be honest, is going to do the exact same thing. I think he'll just put everything down to inflation. But the whole trust point is you're starting, people going to these games, we're already feeling the effects of cost of living, let alone trying to pay extra to support your club on top of it. But again, I think Daniel Levy would probably buck the trend and probably rise them as well, to a certain degree. So I would say expect the season tickets prices to be rose. What I don't agree with, and I think, if he wants to be fair with the fans, which he doesn't want, we've seen time and time again, he's tone deaf, he wouldn't increase them. I mean,
Yeah.
A report from the UEFA European Club Finance and Investment Landscape came out, and Spurs, I think, take in terms of all of Europe, we're the sixth most profitable on match day. We take in 102 million on match day just from season ticket alone, or just from ticket sales alone last season. But when you look at the clubs we're up around, the likes of your Real Madrid, your PSGs, and stuff like that, but they're watching the best players and they're getting success. Right now, we're not watching any of the best players in the world, and we have a distinct lack of success. So why are we paying premium prices and the product on the pitch is absolutely shocking? It's nowhere near what we deserve. You look, especially off the back of this season, and when you look at the ambition in the transfer market in terms of the youngsters coming in or some of the players that they picked up from relegation fodder, you're not seeing that money being reinvested to bringing in the best for you to be able to go and enjoy and stuff like that. So for me, I do think in order to stop the rise of ticket prices, because I think it's easy for these owners just to go, oh, well, inflation, that's why it's being hyped. I think to a large degree, it's too easy. And I do think this is where at some point fans do need to come together, really together, and protest to stop the rise of ticket prices, but not only at Tottenham Hotspur, but everywhere around the Premier League. Because eventually someone like me who's on the breadline, Jack, going to be priced out, won't be able to go to games. Eventually it's going to go to a point. They already wanted to bring in a Super League. You can only imagine what prices they were going to charge you for games there. It is going to get to a point where it becomes like American sport, Jack, where, the average person can't go to your NBA game and stuff like that. You're going to be paying through the roof just for an average seat. It can't keep going like this. And I do think for the greater good, at some point, people need to come together and just say, no, enough is enough. That's it. Because you can't be paying in around what Real Madrid and PSG are making off tickets, in and around the same profits. But then you look at what they're putting on the pitch, the product putting on the pitch, it doesn't match up. So for me, there's no way he should get away with being able to hike these Friday. They should remain the same. Now, it is worth noting, I think it was 4 seasons or something, maybe 6 seasons or something, he didn't hike the prices before he did last year. But it doesn't matter. We're already paying up the premium end. There's not too much room for him to hike them anymore before fans lose their mind. It's like, well, hang on, you're making more tickets than Real Madrid and PSG, and we're being served up this shit. So he's at that sort of barrier where there's not really much more room for him to go. But knowing him, he will try.
Alpesh Patel saying they probably will increase my season ticket up to 8% as a minimum. And then there was actually another kind of interesting comment from somebody saying that Daniel Levy will likely increase the season ticket prices, but that's actually in an effort to make more people do kind of what Sam was alluding to, which he might be doing, which is kind of picking and choosing which games to go to, not buying a season ticket. But then Daniel Levy will increase the season ticket prices to then just increase also the prices of just going for one day only. So then he just kind of wins in all scenarios. I know this might come across as like an obvious question, Dermot, but I think we do have to ask it because people in the chat are, saying it would be baffling if he did increase it, because we've had a huge, disappointing season, lots of underperformance on the pitch this season, and there have been lots of large scale protests, right, against the ownership this year. Yeah. If they do increase the ticket prices again, is it just more and more obvious, if not completely obvious, that obviously they're more interested in the bottom line, profits over actual success on the football pitch?
Yeah, they are. They are more interested in the bottom line. They're not interested in the fans. If they're interested in the fans, they wouldn't have taken the concessions away from the older fans. Look, Sam's in England. It's expensive for him to get the games anyway. But for the likes of you, myself and Dave, we won't be able to go next season. Well, I won't be able to afford to go next season if they increase the ticket prices, because it's only expensive enough for me to go. It's costing me near enough €300 just to get over there, and that includes the ticket, plus then where we've got to stay for a couple of days. So you're looking at a tail end of nearly €500-600. I'm on the breadline. I can't really afford that. This is only my one trip a year. And Daniel Levy, it doesn't matter about overseas fans. He's got to look after the fans that go week in, week out. That they're the ones that keep the club going. It's the fans that play the pay's wages. It's the fans that make sure the staff get paid. And if you keep putting up ticket prices year after year after year, I know there were 6 years it didn't go up. If you can't blame inflation all the time, it's a stupid argument.
Darmo, when you're filling out that stadium, regardless of inflation and stuff like that, the cost of living crisis, he's always going to keep putting them up.
Yeah. He is, but he shouldn't have to, because the genuine fans that go there are going to be driven away. And what you're going to be left with then are fans full of people that don't really support the club. That even Spurs diehard has given up his season ticket this season. He's put in the chat. How long has Adrian been a fan? Do you know? A long time. And he's given up his season ticket. I will never hold the season ticket. You, Dave, probably, you might do, Dave. I won't, but I don't know if you, Jack, probably will. Sam probably will. But, you know, it's pricing the genuine football fan out of going to football matches now. And it's getting ridiculous. I mean, I can remember going to Tottenham years ago and it cost me £5 to get in. I mean, a fiver. A fiver wouldn't even buy you a program now. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Tottenham don't care. And it all comes back for the start of the Premier League. Once that come in, once football money comes in, then it's all commercialized. It's all about corporate. Somebody put, and I agree with it, corporate greed. It's all about what's our bottom line. Yeah, the fans may have the best of facilities they didn't have 20 years ago. We've got the best of stadiums, the best of facilities, whatever. But it's still a lot of money. Say if I went and I took both my boys there over to Tottenham, right? It would cost me near enough £1,000 just to get over there, and then have a good day out and then get a flight back. It would cost me nearly €1,000. You could pay that going on a holiday, I don't know, Jack, to New York or to Seattle, where you live. Grand will probably get you one way there. It's just football gone money mad, and it's pricing us out of the game. And once you price the genuine fan out of the game, then it isn't football anymore. It's just about corporate. You might as well sit at home and watch it on telly. It's a lot bloody cheaper.
Yeah, just to add to that,
go ahead, Sam.
Just to, you look at the 3 most expensive kits in the Premier League, right? Or even it might even be the world at the moment. But it's like, we're like number 2 or number 3. I think we're just behind Arsenal. Arsenal pay like £95 for a kit. We pay £94 or something stupid. That's just for a shirt, right? We're talking about corporate greed here, yeah? And I know that you can say, all these fans that go into the club shop or whatever, but I don't really have a problem with them doing that because they're coming from, people will say they're the tourist fans, but they're coming from the far reaches of the world for, an amazing day out to go see the club that they support. They go to buy the kit. That's their right. But for the average person, when you're looking at it and you're saying a kit without any numbers or anything, any names, is £95 near enough. Then you get the name of like Kulusevski or something, and the letters are like £4 or £5 a letter. That shirt's becoming nearly £200 just for the shirt alone. Yeah. So imagine you're a family. You've got 3 boys or something, right? And you
share
gone are
one
the
for
days
each
where
of them.
basically gone are the days where you go in there and you buy a shirt, you buy shorts or whatever. Even the shorts are like 40, 50 quid. So the amount of money people are spending on all of the apparel, it's no wonder why like DHgate and those sort of sites are doing so well, right? Because there's just no reason to buy an quote unquote authentic kit when no one can tell the difference between a DHgate kit and an official kit, and basically everyone in the stands is wearing a DHgate kit because they can't afford the prices of the regular kits. I don't really buy the kits anymore. I'd prefer to spend a similar amount of money on a vintage kit because I thought they've got more style. You know what I mean? It's like I'm gonna cherish that kit forever. I'm not gonna go and basically buy the kit every season just because it's a new kit. You know what I mean? Like, to be fair, the kits next season, from what I've seen, do look kind of sexy. So I might have to buy at least one of them. That black kit is doing things.
I'm trying to find a way to convince you, to get the 200.
But it is just crazy to see the amount of money that the club fleeces from us, and then you go in. And I get it. Like in American sports, it's worse. But a bottle of water is like £3 in the stadium, and it's like I need a drink when I'm cheering. You know what I mean? So you got to go in there and spend £3, and then you spend an £8 or whatever on like some chips and some like barely edible chicken nuggets.
Yeah,
it's just crazy, and that's without even getting beers and stuff because I don't really drink that much at the stadium.
Do you know what? One thing I've never done is actually eat at the stadium. I've had like a Coke or a water or something like that, but I've never ate at the stadium. I always prefer to go to one of the chippers along the high road.
Yeah.
I think you get more bang for your buck. Big guy like me needs to be filled, so cheaper, and the more food.
Kimchi bowl isn't enough for
exactly. Exactly. Jeez, Sam, just quickly a bit of nostalgia. He's bringing up the point about the shorts. So I remember when they used to be about 20 quid a pop, and then your socks would be 10 quid, and then you get your jersey. You know what I mean? Madness. Absolute madness. Anyway, look, let's keep it moving because we will be going over to Big Up after we finish here, and we will be doing a watch along for Liverpool PSG and hopefully enjoying a cracking game of football. So let's keep it moving, Jacko.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that question. I just wanted to add that I thought Stateside Footy and Round Table Talk had very good comments about the fact that, and it's only coming, I'm only saying this from an American perspective, from a Yanks perspective, there is this concept of like, there is a threshold for what people are actually willing to pay for, even though they are complaining, even though they know it's ridiculous. People for some reason just still pay it because it is their team and they want to go see their team play, and they will pay £10 for just a bag of popcorn. They will pay $20 for a beer, like we do in the USA and whatnot, even though it's absolutely insane. People for some reason still do it just because it is that threshold that they try to push you towards. And it's just become beyond insanity, but they just know that people are willing to do it. But we do have another question here. And also as well, Paul Markey, Dave, has just come in here saying, have to correct you, Dave. First goal came from Johnson being asleep, compromising Porro. Also, I've noticed a pace of play is a lot slower and the pressing has become poor. Dave, he wanted you to call out Johnson.
Now, look, I think Johnson's an incredible guy. If I had a daughter, marry her tomorrow. But as a footballer, I don't rate him whatsoever. He absolutely grinds my gears. But when you're in a position of Pedro Porro, you've got Udabur running, you've got Bentancur running, and you've got Johnson running. It's unforgivable when then defenders are running backwards to try and cover them runs. You play it straight into the defender's path. Don't get me wrong, good anticipation by Kirkus, but that ball from Porro needs to be played between the centre-back and the full-back for Johnson to run onto, or in over the top. Putting it in along the ground like that always runs the risk of Kirkus turning, intercepting that, and moving forward. Don't get me wrong, fully agree that maybe Johnson could have burst and maybe made a lot more of an effort to try and get back. Fully agree with you on that one. I blame him for the goal at Man City. You go back and look at Maddison, took a player out, took a yellow card. Johnson should have realised danger and done the same thing. He didn't. But for me, this one, all of it really does go on Pedro Porro. The breakaway we had with the options he had running off him, it's unforgivable for him to give that ball away. But look, let's be honest, it's not the first time we've seen it. We've seen Kulusevski bursting through insane positions, James Maddison, other players like that, and not being able to pick the pass. But I do see what you're saying. Look, for me, that Porro and Johnson combination just does not work as a two down that right-hand side. In my old lifetime playing football, you've also, the relationships, with the people in front of you really matter. And for me, it doesn't work. It's got to go, for sure, Paul Markey.
Yeah, I mean, Dave made a funny joke where people were upset about seeing Bentancur, Basuma together, saying never again. And I think Dave said to Paul Markey, what about Porro Johnson? I thought we were saying that should never happen again. And yet it did. Lads, I have one question here just on Thursday night. Kind of need you to answer it quickly because we have a watch along later on Big Up. And then also we have some members' questions that we need to get through. But just going to get some quick answers from all of you on this. Our season hinges on Thursday night. Is there anyone on the panel who thinks that maybe we are in serious danger of being knocked out, or do we expect us to overturn the deficit? Dave, quick answer from you on that one.
Yeah, look, I'll tell you why I'm mainly concerned, Jack, is my biggest problem for the last 2 years has been the efficiency of that forward line and the ability to create multiple good chances across any game of football. Now, the reality is we can do it, but it's very few and far in between. You go back, look, when we slapped up Man United, Man City, Aston Villa, West Ham, it's proven we can do it. But the problem is it's very far and few in between. Also, you take into account when there's pressure on Tottenham Hotspur. It's just been my whole lifetime. Big game, pressure on Tottenham, we fail. So for me, I do see us sort of sleepwalking into danger. My only hope is that we can have one of their performances where we pull out a 4-1 out of nowhere. But in large, I think it's going to be a long evening, a tight game, and that's why I'm not going to get carried away. I'm predicting sort of a tight scoreline. Hopefully, Tottenham come out the right side. In essence, the Tottenham that I know and support, especially under Pochettino, we should be slapping up teams like that. But where we are now, I mean, especially with that forward line, I just don't hold out too much hope, Jack, to be quite frank. But look, I'm always hoping, I'm always supporting, and everyone knows I'm the internal optimist. So come Thursday, I'll try and find a way. But at the end of the day, it's up to the team. Let's see what they can do.
Sam, your birthday is tomorrow. Please, everybody, wish Sam a happy
yes.
birthday. But
Big 26 tomorrow.
will your birthday be slightly ruined on Thursday night, or will it be made even better?
Look, there's only one way we can play worse than we played in that first game, and that's if Vicario has a mare. And so I have this, I don't know if it's, as I've said before, with stuff like, Spurs won't get relegated. I've got this arrogance that, like, we will beat them. Like, we will. I don't see it any other way. Yeah. I just don't see it any other way. I just think that.
But then are you forgetting the likes of Austin Pereira, Dennis Mora, shit like that. So
well,
it's capable.
I tried to, but everyone keeps.
The manager was in prison and we still lost.
I tried to forget Dave, but everyone keeps fucking reminding me.
Keep reminding him. I think it sounds like Sam, is just going to pray for some type of turnaround, like plenty of us will. Dermo, quick answer from you, sir. Are we turning around the deficit Thursday night?
Yeah, no problem. In 84, 41 years ago, we beat a Dutch side and a German side on our way to winning that 84 UEFA Cup. And we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to be a Dutch side and a German side and win that Europa League. It's coming home.
And now you wonder why we think you live in World War II all the time.
Well, if you look at omens, I'm sorry. I look at omens and there's a big omen there. We beat Bayern Munich and we beat I forget, we beat a Dutch side in the quarterfinals and we won it. So why not? And we actually won that UEFA Cup very quickly with nearly a reserve side. None of the general first two players were playing that season. We had a horrendous injury to the end of that season and we won it. So why not? History can repeat itself.
Fair.
And now we're going to go on to the members' questions here. Thank you guys for sending those in. Thanks for being a member. By the way, if you are a member for future panel shows, you do have a perk of being able to reserve questions at the end here that we will answer. By the way, well over 200 in the house, I think, on YouTube this whole time, but we haven't even reached 100 likes. So if you could try to get us up there, it'd be much appreciated. Then also we've had plenty watching us on Twitter. So do follow us over to YouTube if you did want to get involved in the show in some way. I'm going to pass these off to you guys one at a time. Each of you will take one. I'm going to take Ryan's first. Ryan saying, why don't we, when we don't win on Thursday, does Ange get sacked and who would you bring in and why? I do think he would, to be honest, because I think they're trying to give him every chance possible to go for some type of cup run, to go for some sort of type of cup push. If he does lose Thursday night, I think that's just, in a way, just unforgivable. You can't be losing to AZ Alkmaar in the first rounds like this. Who would you bring in? To be honest, Ryan, I can't really give an answer to that because Dave and I have said before, I think years and years have gone by that, honestly, like, I don't see Spurs as an attractive proposition for many managers that actually have, a real trajectory going. I think the only manager that would take a club like Spurs is maybe a guy that's perhaps didn't do too well at his last job, or maybe he hasn't had a job in a while or something like that. And he's willing to take just anything. I just don't know if Spurs are becoming an attractive proposition to bring in any manager that we want, really.
Just quickly, I'm also going to add on the back of that. We're getting an interim. You sack Ange Postecoglou, you're going to get Mason or Montgomery or someone like that to the end of the season. There's no manager of any sort that is doing a good job at another club that's going to walk away with 10 games to go and remain at the end of the season. It will be the summer or more or less coming out the back end of the season before you still will see appointments. So, I think I don't want to see anyone really go mad that we haven't brought in Areola as soon as we sacked Ange, because I think that's an unrealistic expectation from you. I think there has to be, you've got to take into account what these managers are doing at other clubs, and they're not going to walk away from that to come here.
Future Sprite, Future Silly White, kind of just offering a comment saying has to be Poch Mark II. I think he's saying from Bournemouth, maybe saying Iriola, but I've heard Inzaghi from Inter. I don't think any of them are, to be honest, are going to be coming in the summer. Future Sprite, Future Slowly White. Just maybe I'm being negative.
The Bournemouth owner spoke today, didn't he? That they're doing everything they can to try and keep him. They're going to get him the players he wants this summer, and everything else to kick it on.
I said this the other night too, that with Iriola, why would Iriola abandon, something that he's doing? He's building something really good over there at Bournemouth. So why would he abandon that for Spurs? If he were to leave that behind, you would see him going to a club that's like more like a Real Madrid, like a Bayern Munich or something like that instead, or even maybe a Premier League club that at least has more, maybe more of an attractive sort of outcome than what Spurs have at the moment. I just don't see why Iriola would abandon what he's already building there. PH family, I'll pass this one to you, maybe Sam. Other managers have been sacked for a lot less. Why do you think Ange has been shown so much patience from the board? We've asked this question to you before, so what's your little statement on this?
I'll keep it brief. I think it's more than just this reason, but I'll just say one reason. Because the hate that Ange is getting from the fan base is shielding the board. And I think that they are cowards, and basically they're doing everything they can to stay out of the firing line for as long as possible. So that for me, that's why.
It's very, very efficient and very well answered by you there, Sam. Out of 10, how nervous are you for Thursday's game, Dermo?
I'm not nervous at all.
Come on, really?
Look, I'm being honest. I am 9. I am really nervous. I am extremely nervous. Dave is right. We could sleepwalk into danger here. Look, all joking aside, I know I'm usually delusional and all this. We're going to win. But no, I agree with Dave. We could walk away. We can walk ourselves into trouble. And we've got to get it right. We've got to get it spot on. And if we don't win, then I think we have run the risk of having a Ryan Mason in for the end of the season. So, but yeah, the first 10 minutes is going to be crucial of that game on Thursday. How we start. If we start positively, then we should win. If we start like we did against Bournemouth or like we did in Holland, then I think we could be in a whole lot of trouble.
And then Dave, Artist T, he's your man. He loves to ask you questions. I think I'll pass you each of his.
Run through them.
Here. Of course, Alkmaar will sit back on Thursday, but what else do you think they'll do after they watch that Bournemouth game?
I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe potentially if Romero starts using him as a trigger press a bit like what Bournemouth done to get their early chances in that game and put pressure on him, knowing that he's rusty. But I think to a large degree, you're actually going to see them approach the game similar to the way they did when they came to our home stadium. They've got something to hold on to at the end of the day. I'd be interested to see what they do if we go 1-0 up. They have to come out and play then in that regard. The game's still in the balance. So it'd be interesting to see what they do, and it'd be interesting to see what we do. Do we take our foot off the gas? Or do we press the issue and go for the kill, RST? I mean, look, that's why it's the beautiful game, because there's a lot of unknowns.
And then I'll kind of combine these two. He says, since we likely won't make Europe next season, what's your biggest worry? Tons of youth players being sold or put on loan? He says, do you think Mikey Moore will make a move the moment he turns 18, whether it's a loan or sold? After all, he has way bigger clubs after him, and we likely have that conversation with people close to him. Will we go Project Youth even more, Dave, basically, if we don't get European football next season?
Well, I think it all depends who the manager is, Jack. And is he sort of a manager that's been proven elsewhere and relies on top talent to go and win trophies, or is he a guy like a Pochettino who can work with younger players and bring them on to a new level? I think it really sort of depends on that, to be quite honest. But I would argue without Europe, I do think internally there would be a lot of pressure to probably push some of the youth out on loan, potentially sell a couple, and stick with the senior players that we've invested money into, a bit like what Tim Sherwood tried to do with Tim Sherwood and the whole Harry Kane situation. When it comes to Mikey Moore, look, if I'm Mikey Moore and I'm watching Brennan Johnson start ahead of me every week, I'm pushing for a move. I'm sorry, I am. Mikey Moore, you're not talking about your average 17-year-old. You're talking about an exceptional 17-year-old who wins games for England at that age group, walks straight from the under 18 straight into the senior team. And let's be brutally honest, has probably provided me some of my most exciting wing performances this season. So for me, if I'm Mikey Moore, I would put the pressure on the club, yeah.
And then I'll go back to this other one that he mentioned, but I think it kind of connects to the whole youth being sold or not being sold. Saying, what are your thoughts on this one? One of the members on a Spurs channel I was watching yesterday thinks that there will be a mass exodus this summer, like Vicario and Romero, because they aren't going to want to stick around when the club is trying to do this Project Youth. In terms of Vicario leaving, it's because we brought in Kinski early, despite us having Austin and him being a good number 2. Could you see Vicario, Romero potentially leaving this summer, Dave?
Yeah, but not because we want to go down a Project Youth route. I sort of said a couple of, maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, Jack, that I think you will see some of our big players want to push for a move out of Tottenham if you don't have European football. I also think you leave yourself open to likes of Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, teams like that coming in and placing bids. When you're not in Europe, you're vulnerable in terms of keeping your best players. And I think, yeah, of course we're going to be in that position this summer. It's not because we're going to want to go down Project Youth. It's because players have ambitions bigger than Tottenham and want to go and win things.
And then he also says, I mentioned that there's a theory that Ange has a break clause in his contract, which included not qualifying for Europe next season. What do you make of this? I think he also said as well in the YouTube live chat saying like this would make it so that it's even cheaper for Spurs to kind of pay out the rest of the contract.
I'd have no doubt there's a clause in the contract in terms of no Europe and making it easier. You know, you look at Jose Mourinho, the reason why they sacked him before the City game is if he won that and we got European football, it was going to cost them a hell of a lot more to get rid of him. So I have no doubt with the way Daniel Levy operates, there's a clause in that contract for sure.
Levy loves it, a performance incentive. Drum kicker teacher, he absolutely loves it. Thanks for all the support that you showed this channel, my friend. And I'll kind of give this to any one of you guys. I'll read it here now. Here's an interesting question. If Spurs were hell-bent on changing their philosophy to build around the youth, which is fine, why did they hire Ange Postecoglou in the first place? He goes on to say, nowhere on his CV has he oversaw a rebuild. Has he had youth on his title-winning squads? Of course, but they weren't primary players. Ange is a dogmatic coach set in his beliefs. You hire Ange Postecoglou if you're looking to win trophies. If the model is Brighton or Luton, then you hire a coach who's a player development coach. I guess what he's alluding to is maybe Spurs have gotten kind of their priorities kind of entangled or kind of confused here, where they want to go down this project youth, but maybe the manager that they hired in the first place wasn't necessarily the right guy to lead that charge.
Yeah, but I don't think it's just the club. I also think many of the fans sort of misinterpreted what Postecoglou was going to do, Jack. I remember when he first signed, I remember saying, you know, out there, many people like, he's here for rebuild. He's going to be committed to 4 years, bring in young players, bring them through. And I stopped it straight in the tracks, Jack, if you remember. I said, no, this guy's used to winning. You know, you'll hear him come in here and you'll hear him this season talking about wanting to win trophies. It's what he done all last season. It's what he done over the summer. But when you look at the recruitment, it doesn't add up. And I just think not only did the club maybe misinterpret Postecoglou, I also think much of the fan base did to a large degree, Jack. And I don't want to, you know, people can deny it, but I just go back to streams where we done. I can bring up the live chat and comments underneath. You know, a lot of fans did have the perception that he was coming in here to rebuild. Even when around the whole Harry Kane saga, it was like he doesn't need players like that. Just give him 3 bang average players. We'll see a great forward line, nice and fluid. I mean, how has that worked out? So I just think in general, a lot of people around Tottenham Hotspur maybe misinterpreted Ange Postecoglou to a large degree.
And just want to say this, I think, been a very, very good live stream. Very, very efficient one. Thank you for all the support that's come in. Thank you to all the members for the brilliant, brilliant questions. You guys are very, very, well thought, I think, with those. And to be honest, I think you guys put in some very good questions. Wish we could maybe have spent more time on them. But we do have a big upstream that we'll be doing, a very, very good Champions League game that I'm pretty sure almost all of you will be watching tonight. So we encourage you guys to follow us over to the Big Up platform. We'll be doing a watch along over there in about 5 minutes time, basically. So grab a drink, grab a snack, and we'll see you there very, very shortly. So please join us, help us out a ton by being there with us. And it's just nice to watch it with friends and maybe take our minds, off of Spurs before we descend into the madness on Thursday night. But let's thank Dermot and Sam. Thought they did brilliant tonight, filling in as well in Dermatron's case. Sam, we'll go to you on Twitter. Any final words from yourself tonight? And by the way, Sam, I thought you were brilliant.
Oh, thank you. That's obviously a pleasure.
Happy
as always
birthday
to
as
be
well.
On. Thank you. I mean, if you want to follow me over to Twitter, that would be great. So that when I get my notification that someone's liked my latest rant, it's not short-lived when I find out that it's a sex bot. But
it's how it is nowadays.
It's up to you guys, whatever. But yeah, no, it's good to get on. Dermo, good to be on with you as well. Dave, good to have you back consistently now, hopefully as well. So hopefully all those as the weather's getting warmer, you'll be a bit healthier for us. Get back on the pitch.
Dave doesn't like the warm weather, so best prayers for him. Sam, what's the birthday meal tomorrow?
Yeah, unless I have aircon and 4 sides coming at me, I'm going to be very unhappy over the summer, Sam.
Any special birthday plans tomorrow?
Please wish Sam a happy birthday. It's his birthday tomorrow. Everyone deserves a birthday wish.
Thank you, guys. I'm going out with I decided last minute to take the day off work. Because I've got the dentist in the morning, so got to have the smile looking fresh. I know. And then I was like, you know what? My nan is here from Cyprus, so I was like, I might as well take the day off, spend it with her.
Yeah.
So I'll probably go for lunch with her somewhere. I haven't really decided on what food yet. And then we're going to a restaurant that's kind of famous for like fish, so it will be some sort of fish in the evening. I don't know what the menu will be saying, but I would think some sort of fish in the evening, boys. I'll let you know in the group chat.
Yeah, I was going to say to you, come to me for suggestions, because there's a lot around, the right type of food on a given day, your mood, what you're craving, you know, what you've eaten previously and stuff like that. There's a lot to picking a meal that people maybe don't take into consideration. But when it comes to fish, unfortunately, I can't help you. I think your Jack's more up your alley there. But thank you very much, Sam, tonight. You're absolutely brilliant, my man. I want to say a massive thank you to Noel O'Sullivan as well. It's his first time listening. Well, hopefully you enjoyed yourself and we haven't turned you away from the channel, my man. Really appreciate it.
And follow us over to YouTube, please, Noel. Thank you so much for leaving in the comment.
Big up, Noel.
And also, give Sam some suggestions, please, in the chat for whatever fish he'll be choosing. Dermatron, class from you as always, sir. Thanks for helping us out. Thanks for filling in. Like, you know, it's like something that Spurs don't have. We filled in with quality. We have quality off the bench. So thank you, sir. Thank you, Dermatron.
Nah, no problem, lads. Anytime you need any help, you know, I'm always here to jump in as a super sub. I'm back in the day. But happy birthday to you, Sam. Hope you have a fantastic day. And I wish I was 26 again. That seems such a long time ago for me now. It's a different lifetime. But yeah, if you like what I have to say, get over to THFC till I die. There's me, there's Colum over there, Tequila, and also Kevin, who's joined us. So we've got 2 Man United fans joining the channel. Given they're actually enjoying Tottenham, believe it or not, doing everything just not to watch their own club.
Too many similarities between the clubs at the moment.
Yeah, well, we're sort of trying to convert them to Tottenham fans. It is working. We are getting there. But yeah, if you can do that as well, get over there.
I don't want them as Tottenham fans, Darmo. If they're willing to change their clubs like that, I don't want them as Tottenham fans.
I'm only joking, Dave. I'm only joking, Dave.
You can tell them from me, stick to United.
Yeah, I have done. But yeah, if you want to get over there, please subscribe, like, and do it here, and follow Sam on X as well. It'd be really great. Thanks, guys.
No, thank you, Dermatron.
I want to say a massive thank you to Sam and Dermot. Make sure you get across their socials, hit that subscribe button. I also want to say a massive thank you to all of you guys at home, giving up your time on a Tuesday evening to come and listen to what we have to say and what we're talking about. Really appreciate all of you putting in your input. The engagement has been absolutely amazing today. Who knew so many people had frustrations with the medical department? But look, I want to say a massive thank you to everybody. Also, just quickly before we get to this, I want to say a massive thank you to Donovan, Jerome, Blaine Devlin, Paul Markey as well for going the extra mile. Really appreciate all of you guys. Very, very kind. You know, none of us have big wigs, you know, around us or anything like that. We don't work for like Sky Sports or anything, you know, so we don't get paid basically from any of these fuckers. So every little really helps keeping this channel progressing and stuff like that. So thank you very much. And last but not least, guys, if you're not sick of us already, we will be going to watch PSG Liverpool. Hopefully a real quality game of football. That first leg was an absolute unbelievable game. I think it's the best game of the evening. So if you want to come and join us, if you felt like you would so much to say and you couldn't get on here, get over to Big Up, click that join stage, come on and have a chat with us about all things Tottenham Hotspur or life. I do dating advice, food advice, anything you can imagine. We give that advice. So make sure you come over and join us, guys. I'll be the Zane. See you back here tomorrow.
And you can join us for free on screen as well if you just want to chat, you know, and pop on. You can pop on for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just pop on screen. Anybody's welcome to join. You know, we're not excluding anybody, so please follow us over. But yes, great content today, and I thought it was a great stream. Thanks for all the engagement, and thought there were some really, really good comments from everybody tonight. So hopefully we'll have a great panel show next week, and hopefully we get some good luck on Thursday night. See you very soon, everybody.
As Larice would say, au revoir.
Good night, everybody.
Come on, you Spurs.